We are here at a First Liberty event, and I am joined by Allie Beth Stuckey. She is a wife, a mother of three, and the host of the podcast, Relatable. She also has a book that's titled, You're Not Enough, and That's Okay. She comments on all kinds of things as far as culture, theology, and politics from a Christian conservative perspective. Allie, Beth, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to focus a lot on media for today because you're obviously in that world. You have your podcast, you have your book. So what inspired you to go into media and have a public platform, even in the midst of today's polarization of the media and politics?
Yeah. So I've always liked to talk. I knew I was going to do something with talking, but I didn't know what it would be. I certainly didn't know what a podcast was when I was growing up. We didn't really have things like that. But I've always loved to write. I've always loved to communicate. And then when I was working in PR after college, this was about 2015. Everyone remembers the 2015-2016 election. I was living in a college town. I was leading a Bible study of freshman girls, and they were all really smart Christian girls raised probably in fairly conservative homes, and yet I could tell just by talking to them, they were very confused about what to think about these political issues. And one of the young women, and she's a wife and mom now, and she's a Christian conservative, but she told me she loved Bernie Sanders. And I thought, okay, this is a problem. This is actually the most biblically knowledgeable girl in this Bible study, and yet her political views are incongruent. And not that I saw myself as a political expert, but I said, okay, I think I can maybe help them think about these issues that for the Christian aren't really primarily political. They're primarily biblical: abortion, marriage, family. These are very existential, biblical, fundamental issues. And so I tried to expand my, I don't want to call it discipleship necessarily, I guess just my message of, okay, here's how we should think about these issues to the sorority houses that I lived really close to. My husband and I, after we got married in 2015, lived right off Sorority Row. I reached out to all these sororities. I still had my full-time PR job. This was in the evenings. Hey, can I come speak to your chapter about the election and these issues? And I did that. I loved it. It expanded into a blog, which expanded into kind of a social media presence, which then over time led me to The Blaze, which then eventually led to my podcast, Relatable. And then, I've been speaking and writing books and all of these things since then. And so that's kind of how I got started. And I just praise God for his providence and how he has led it and orchestrated it and everything. And I'll keep doing it as long as we feel like this is what is, God is calling me to do.
So as a professional in the world of media nowadays, what do you wish more people understood about you, the work you do, and your heart?
Yeah, I think it's really easy for people on the other side of the aisle to assume that if anyone is making if it's their professional job, so they're making money from talking about these issues, that it is insincere, that you're only talking about these very contentious issues in order to get attention or to get clicks. I really believe every single thing I say. I talk about gender and the family and marriage and abortion and reproductive technology and theology and all of these things because I think they're important. I really believe them. And even though my views have grown and hopefully deepened over time, I have always had these core beliefs, and they're just manifesting themselves in a podcast and books now. And so it's easy to malign your political enemies by impugning their motives and assuming that they're just in it for attention or whatever. But that's what I would say. I truly believe everything that I say. I would not say it if I didn't really believe it and think that they were so important.
So I heard you like alliteration.
I
so
do.
Tell us some of your sayings.
Sure.
Because they have substance and they have alliteration. And I love alliteration too. So
Yes.
I'll give you the opportunity to share.
Sure. Two of them are politics matter because policy matters because people matter. Politics affects policy. Policy affects people. And people matter. People matter because they're made in the image of God. People matter to God, and therefore, especially to Christians, they matter to us. Politics is not the only way to love your neighbor, but it is a way to love your neighbor. It's not just some abstract debate that's going on between people who like to get into arguments on Facebook. they're policies that really affect the lives of people, especially the most vulnerable, especially those without political capital, like children, like babies. And so it is a way for us to be responsible citizens, to engage and to love our neighbor, to treat other people how we would want to be treated. That's one alliteration. Another alliteration that we often say is raise a respectful ruckus. Raise a respectful ruckus for the things that matter. And while not everyone is called to be a political activist, I've never said that. I've got a lot of moms in my audience. They've got, like I do, little kids running around. They don't have time to run for school board. They don't have time to go out there and protest every issue, talk about every issue. And that's not what God calls everyone to. Your platform right now might be the 3 kids in front of you. You raising a respectful ruckus for the things that matter might be making sure that the preschool that they are attending is teaching them curriculum, and if it applies, theology that is solid, that is based in truth, biblical truth, moral truth, factual truth. You raising a respectful ruckus could be having a conversation with your friend who has been manipulated into thinking being pro-abortion is the Christian position or whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily mean having a microphone. It doesn't necessarily mean protesting or running for office. The different seasons of our lives call for different responsibilities, for a different level of outspokenness, I would say. All of us are called to be obedient. All of us are called to be agents of order, speakers of truth in the various areas of our life.
You also have a saying that is about sharing the arrows.
Yes.
So I would love to give you the opportunity to explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so sharing the arrows, it's not an alliteration, but it's still one that has kind of stuck. And what it means is when you see someone who is speaking up for what is good, right, and true, they're saying something, or even if it's just saying something that is deemed controversial, and you either agree with it or you simply want to defend their right to say it without being unfairly maligned, without being bullied, condemned, their livelihood being taken away, all of the consequences that we see today, especially for Christian conservatives trying to live out their faith in word and in deed in the public sphere, rather than saying, I'm really glad that's not me. Whew, lesson learned. I'm definitely not going to speak up now. I'm going to take a step back and just say, sorry that happened, but I will no longer be public about my views. Rather than doing that, you stand up and you say, oh, that thing that Christian just said, yeah, I agree with it. I believe it too. What are you going to do? Whatever name you call her, whatever consequences she faces, whatever arrows you launch her way, bring them here too. That is, again, another way to treat others the way you would want to be treated, because if you were fired or you were bullied because you said your view about what natural marriage is, for example, you would want other people, friends, or just people who share your beliefs to stand up and say, I'm right there with you. I got your back. I'm willing to take those consequences too. That is a kind of courage that is contagious, and that can strengthen someone, that can embolden them in their faith, that can make sure that they double down on what they believe rather than apologizing for something that they're not really sorry for. And we actually have our first event this fall. It's called the Share the Arrows event. It's in Dallas, Texas, and it's for Christian women. Right now, we've got almost 3,000 women signed up. We're hoping for even more. It's September 28th, and we've got speakers and worship that are all coming in, and it's all about that. Like, Christian, conservative women, like, how can we stand up together, make sure we're on the same page biblically, we've got the same view of this, and just stand together in courage for what is right. Again, whether that's as a mom, whether you're a professor, whether you're working in a corporate setting, whether you're an attorney, whether you've got a podcast, or whether you're just an individual on a college campus, like, all of us are called to some form of courage. And if we are sharing the arrows together, if we're able to look around and say, okay, you got me, I got you too, I'm not crazy, I'm not alone, that's really powerful.
So here at First Liberty Institute, we're all about religious liberty. So I wanted to get your take on how the corporate media, let's call it that, covers and represents religious liberty in today's culture.
Yes. So it is seen, religious liberty is seen as secondary, or maybe even tertiary, or maybe even worse than that, to someone's stated identity. So we typically see this conflict when it comes to LGBTQ issues, and then someone's right to say what they believe, even believe what they believe, and to live out their faith. I mean, we see that, I think, most tangibly in something like the Equality Act, which Democrats are going to try really hard to push. And that's basically saying it is more important that this set of people feel affirmed in what they say their identity is than it is for you to be able to exercise your speech or exercise your religious liberty. Of course, First Liberty has taken on many cases within that realm, but even a case like Joe Kennedy, it doesn't have to do with the LGBTQ issue, but Christians are constantly intimidated into thinking that we are the only ones that cannot bring our worldview into the public sphere, and that's how the media covers it. When we do it, it's bigotry, it's colonialism, it's fascism, it's Christian nationalism. But when the secular progressive brings all of their doctrines, which are doctrines, they have religious, spiritual beliefs about human beings, right and wrong, male and female, marriage, they are allowed to use those beliefs in the public sphere to inform and shape everything. If they're allowed to, they should be allowed to. I'm just saying we should too. We should too. And how the media covers it, we are some kind of special kind of bigot for simply having a public faith. And I'm just tired of being manipulated by that.
That's so good. And it's so good to hear you express it that way. And that's why I'm so encouraged when individuals like you have a platform, books, podcasts where you can authentically and sincerely speak about it. So thank you for that. And I do want to give you the opportunity to talk about your book. So you do have the title, You're Not Enough, and that's okay. Yes. I find that an intriguing title. Yeah. So I want to give you the opportunity to mention that.
Yeah, so that's my book that came out in 2020, You're Not Enough, and That's Okay, Escaping the Toxic Culture of Self-Love. There are political and social issues that we talk about in there, but really it's more this concept of self-help, self-love, self-empowerment that is constantly being fed to women, especially Christian women, and it is a false narrative that you can save yourself, that you can satisfy yourself, that you are enough for yourself, and that you are sufficient for all of your happiness, for all of your needs, and you are entitled to your dreams. You are entitled to every good thing you want, and or really anything you want, and anything that gets in your way is toxic, is an impediment. It's a very selfish, I call it trendy narcissism, but a very selfish narrative that is actually burdening women because it is telling you to exchange the God of Scripture for the God of self. You are your own moral compass. You are your own arbiter of truth, and we make really terrible gods. It's a huge burden to carry. We cannot carry it. When we do, we are actually crushed under the weight of our insufficiency. And in 1 Corinthians 12:9, we read that God's power is actually made perfect in what? Our sufficiency? No, our weakness and our insufficiency. And so it is actually not inside of ourselves that we find satisfaction. It is outside of ourselves, namely in the God who created us. So that's what that book is about, and just how the God of self and the self-centeredness manifests itself in issues like abortion and gender and even things like social justice and all of that. So that's what that book is about. And then I've got another.
You have a new one coming out in the fall.
I do. I've got another book coming out called Toxic Empathy, How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. And we go through 5 different issues on which progressives use this emotional manipulation. I call it empathy shaming or empathy bullying or toxic empathy to convince specifically Christian women that the progressive position is the kind one, is the compassionate and moral one. So on abortion, they say abortion is healthcare. It is loving towards the woman to support her right to abort her child. When it comes to gender, they say that trans women are women. That is the supportive and compassionate take, they say, and they'll always give you a story to try to affirm their position. On marriage, love is love, same kind of manipulative, meaningless mantra. And then no human being is illegal. When it comes to illegal immigration, convincing women especially that open borders, that is the compassionate stance to have. And then social justice is justice. That's another mantra that we hear. And they in all of these cases, use stories that are meant to pull on your heartstrings to convince you that the progressive position is the righteous one. And what I do is try to shift the perspective from who progressives and the media say is the victim to who the actual victim is in each of these subjects, and to give a competing anecdote, but then also to say, but what is actually factually true about this subject and what is biblically true about this? So like with abortion, what is an abortion? Most people actually don't know what that is. What's the history of abortion in America? Where does it come from? And then also, what does the Bible have to say about this? So that's what each of the 5 sections is, to basically make the case that toxic empathy is very harmful, it's very dangerous, and Christians are called to a truth in love approach that is healing and that is actually good for our neighbor rather than harmful.
So you have the podcast Relatable
Yes.
as well. So tell the viewers where they can find you and all of your work, your books, your podcast, all the things.
Yeah, so Relatable is wherever you get your podcast. Relatable with Allie Beth Stuckey, Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can also watch it on YouTube. I think that's how probably most people consume the podcast. You can go to alliebethstuckey.com, and we've got my books and my podcast and all that good stuff there. I speak at a variety of places. I also write sometimes for World Magazine. And so, yeah, I'm on Instagram and all that good stuff. So y'all can find that if you just type my name in, I'm sure.
Perfect. Well, Allie Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. All the best with your
You
book and your podcast, and we'll be following with you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.